Here's how to take your Nikon ZR N-Log footage and transform it from this to this. Add your Nikon N-Log footage to the timeline and then switch over to the color page. Your video should look like this at the minute, kind of washed out and low saturation and low sharpness. Come up to the File menu, come down and click on Project Settings. Choose Color Management and then make sure your color science is set to DaVinci YRGB. Your timeline color space is set to DaVinci WG Intermediate. WG stands for wide gamut. And your output color space is set to either Rec 709 Gamma 2.2 or Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. I'm choosing 2.4 here because my color grading monitor is calibrated to 2.4. And then click Save. The first thing we're going to do is set up our color grading pipeline. This is going to convert the N-Log footage at the start and end of the color grading pipeline. If you don't see these nodes, just click on Nodes at the top. With this first node selected, choose Effects and choose the Color Space Transform effect and drag that on top of this first node. For the input color science, we need to specify that this footage was shot with Nikon N-Log. For the input color space, scroll down here and choose Rec 2020. For the input gamma, scroll down and choose Nikon N-Log. As soon as we do that, the image changes over here, but this is not what it's going to look like at the end, so don't worry. The output color space we need to set to DaVinci Wide Gamut. Remember, that's what we set up in the project settings. And similarly, for the output gamma, we need to choose DaVinci Intermediate. DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate is just a big color space where we can do all of our color grading without knocking up or coming up against the edges and causing potential color problems or artifacts. If you want to, you can right click a node, choose Node Label and say to DaVinci Wide Gamut, but you don't have to. At the moment, we're converting Nikon N-Log to DaVinci Wide Gamut, but we can't actually export DaVinci Wide Gamut and it show up properly on most people's monitors or phones or TVs. To do that, we need to convert to Rec 709. You could convert to a HDR format, but in this video, we're choosing Rec 709 because that's what most people are going to be delivering to, such as YouTube or for project work. Right-click this first node, choose Add Node and choose Add Serial. With this second node selected, drag a new color space transform effect onto the second node. For the input color space, choose DaVinci Wide Gamut. For the input gamma, choose DaVinci Intermediate. That's because this node is outputting DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, so this node needs to read it in. The output color space is what we're going to export to. So scroll down here and find Rec 709. And for the output gamma, choose either Gamma 2.2 or Gamma 2.4, depending on what you set in your project settings. I'm choosing Gamma 2.4. And as soon as I do that, watch what happens in the window. Things are starting to look more normal already. If I use Alt-D on the keyboard to disable those nodes, this is what the original image looks like in N-Log. And this is what it looks like when we've done that technical conversion from N-Log to Rec 709 via DaVinci Wide Gamut. Click Effects to close that window and make a bit more space. Everything we're going to do is going to happen between these two nodes. We're not going to add anything before this node or anything after this node. Click the first node, right click and choose Add Node, Add Serial. Now we can start to do the actual color grading work. You can use as many or as few nodes as you want here, but I'm going to show you a basic color grading pipeline that you can use for probably 80% of your videos when you're getting started. This first node, if we want to, we can add a node label. And this is what we're going to use to adjust the exposure. Click this drop-down button and choose Waveform to get an idea of the brightness values across the image. Generally speaking, for my skin, we want the skin to sit somewhere about the 70 line. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the HDR palette and I'm going to use this global exposure slider. I can increase the exposure or decrease the exposure. I'm just going to add a small amount of exposure, maybe something like plus 12. This was exposed pretty well when I shot it, so I don't have to do too much here. Right click this node and then add a new serial node. This next node we're going to use to adjust the contrast. To adjust the contrast, switch over to the primary color wheels and then just drag the contrast left to decrease the contrast or right to increase it. You can also use the pivot to control how that contrast is applied. We want to add a fair amount of contrast, maybe something about 1.2 1.2, maybe 1.26, and we can adjust the pivot to get the look that we want. Let's say about 0.375. So this is a matter of taste or artistic interpretation. You can use whatever values you want, but these are reasonable starting values. It will depend on how your image looks and whether it's a low key or high key image. And basically you'll need to tweak this value for every scene that you've got. Right click on contrast, choose add serial, and this node we're going to use to balance the colors to get the colors looking reasonable. To do that, we're going to switch back over to the HDR palette and we're going to drag this little dot around in the global wheel to adjust the color balance to get things how we want them to look. Again, there's somewhat subjective taste here, but you should keep an eye on the skin tones to get them looking reasonably decent. And if I zoom in here, I'm going to select this balance node and hit Ctrl D to turn it off. This is the before and this is the after. You can see before there's a bit of a magenta cast, and if I re-enable the node with Ctrl D, things look a bit more neutral now. I'm not going to go into color grading skin tones in this video because this is a massive topic, but the more you practice color grading, the better you'll get at this. Let's go and add another node, and we'll give this a node label of color. Here we can adjust the individual colors of the image. Now we've got a reasonably balanced starting plate from this node, or if we wanted to, we could go and implement some really stylistic colors. With N-Log footage, you're probably going to need to add some saturation, and there's loads of ways to do that in DaVinci Resolve. I'm going to be switching over to this. This is the color slice tool, and this is a nice way to add realistic looking saturation to your image. Hold your mouse button down over the sat label and drag it to the right to increase the saturation and to the left to decrease the saturation. Double click to reset. We're going to increase this saturation gradually, maybe pull it back a little bit, and we'll go with about 1.2 on saturation. If I use Ctrl D to disable that node, this is the before and this is the after. One of the criticisms of N-Log on the Nikon ZR is that it looks a bit softer than some of the other picture profiles or color video modes. We can address this by adding a new node, open up the effects. You can use your middle scroll wheel to scroll around the nodes and search for sharpen. Drag the sharpen effect onto this sharp node. I like to zoom in a little bit onto the skin or people's faces using the scroll wheel on the mouse, and then adjust these sliders to get the look that you want. Obviously, you can make it look pretty horrible. For YouTube, I tend to use a little bit of extra sharpening just to combat the YouTube compression. So let's go about 2.054. You can adjust the fine detail size. I usually like to keep this fairly low, let's say 0.015, and then you can increase the fine details or the sharpening for the fine details by increasing this slider. We're going to add quite a reasonable amount here, maybe something like 1.8. We can also add in some medium details or sharpening for the medium details. Again, if I really zoom in on here, you can make it look pretty horrendous. You can exaggerate every skin imperfection there, but we can add a touch of medium details, maybe 1.248, just to bring out more detail in the skin. Ctrl D to disable that node. This is before the sharpening, and enable that node. This is after the sharpening. You can see this makes a huge difference on N-Log footage. Just going to zoom out, go full screen with Ctrl F. This is with sharpening. This is without. Without. If you do find that maybe you've added a bit too much sharpness and you just want to finesse it without altering all of these controls, open up Global Blend and reduce the blend of the original image with the sharpened image. If you take this all the way down to 0, then you've got effectively no sharpening again. But you can use this just to fine tune or soften, if you'll pardon the pun, that final look. We used quite a few nodes in this video, but there's so much more you can do in Resolve, which is why you definitely should watch this video next if you want to really get started and get a firm, solid foundation in color grading in DaVinci Resolve. I'm Jason Roberts. This is DaVinci Dojo. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next one.